I'm thrilled to have the panel that we have. I'll do quick introductions. Warren Usatine, co-managing partner at Cole Schatz. It's wonderful to have you here. You got a perspective from the managing partner angle, trying to run a business while creating or allowing people to live lives with balance. Christina Malfi, chair of the Employment and Labor Division at Gibbons, a leading female voice in the New Jersey legal community. It's wonderful to have you here. And virtually, due to last-minute technical reasons, it's good to have Heidi Gardner here. Dr. Heidi Gardner is a faculty chair at Harvard Law School, formerly at Harvard Business School, has written and lectured extensively on the business of law. We're going to hear from her as well to start getting into this topic. So we're going to begin the discussion. When the judge arrives, we'll go over to the judge, and then we'll come back when we do. So why don't we start by posing the following challenge. You know, there's some areas of life, there are some professions that may be well suited for someone who wants to live a quiet, simple, and balanced life. Law is not one of those professions. Law has a lot of challenges, some which are unique to the practice of law and some which are not, that make creating balance in one's life rather difficult. The fact that in order to make partner and become successful, you got to spend the first 10, 15, 20 years working really hard. Those are usually the years, not that everyone later doesn't work hard, those are usually the years you're trying to raise little children. There's a lot of challenge with that. At the tail end of one's practice, I've talked to a lot of attorneys, law, in many fields of law, it's very difficult to semi-retire. If you're a trial attorney, either you're trying cases or you're not. And the idea of having some sort of career trajectory of, well, I'll kind of start taking it easy, it's hard for a lot of people to maintain. And, you know, as the sandwich generation amongst us know, taking care of older parents while still dealing with children who may not be so young, but they're not so old, it's a challenge all the way around. Christine, let's start with you. How does one maintain balance? What are the challenges? Where do we begin in trying to maintain some equilibrium in this crazy world and crazy business of ours?
Well, thank you, Rabbi. And first of all, let me say you should be in Boston with the Yankees. They could use some blessings. And if Aaron Boone is your friend, I would bend you to go up there and help those Yankees. How do you maintain balance? It's not easy. I think you have to start with that perspective. I raised 3 children. I have very, very busy practice. I manage 12 lawyers. You're never the perfect mother and the perfect lawyer on the same day. So some days you're really a good mother and some days you're really a good lawyer. But if you try to be the perfect mother and the perfect lawyer, the perfect wife and the perfect daughter, I have a 99-year-old mother as well, who I spend a lot of time advocating for and caring for. You can't do it all. And so I think the way to create that balance is to understand that as a starting point, and then to create, you know, what am I going to be today? And you pivot throughout the day, frankly. I think when you try to do it all, you can't succeed. And it causes you frustration, and then it interferes with your balance. I always felt I had a lot of balance in my life, but that was because I created it. I forced the issue of balance. And I think that was an important thing to do.
Warren, in your years in law school, what was the practice you envisioned and what is the practice that you see today?
So I would say pretty similar. I think you said it, Rabbi, that anybody who enters private practice with the goal of becoming a partner in a law firm knows kind of from chit chat and picking up what you hear, that it's going to be a grind, at least for the first several years, and it was and it is. I would never tell anybody that it's not. But I think, balance is, first of all, I think you define it differently at different points in your life. I think that's important. You have to be honest with yourself and fair to yourself about, what balance is at various stages. When you're a single person and you're trying to become a partner at a law firm, balance means one thing. And then when you're married and you have young kids or you have other responsibilities at home, balance means something else. I mean, I was reading, an ABA article on work-life balance just to see what people are saying about it. And the first thing they said about it was, if you're in firm leadership, it's kind of like what Yogi Berra said. I wish I had a good answer to that question because I'm tired of answering that question. You don't really know. I think that, work balance is something that I think you have to judge for yourself and be fair to yourself, kind of along the lines of what Christine said, is you have to judge it over some reasonable period of time. If you try to judge it every day, I don't think that you'll find yourself very much in balance. If you look at yourself and calibrate every week, every month, every year, and say, where am I in my life? Am I accomplishing all the things inside of my office and outside that I want to accomplish? Am I being a good parent? Am I being a good husband? I think you can get some sense of whether you're in balance over time. I don't think you can do it daily.
Heidi, help us out over here. First of all, if you could just explain to the audience why the lawyers on the panel, we understand, the judge speaking tonight, we understand, we have a PhD on our panel. Tell us a little bit about what it is you do, how it is you got there, and then give us your insight on this opening discussion, please.
My pleasure, and thank you so much for having me. So I have a PhD in organizational behavior, and yet I'm on the faculty at Harvard Law School. I'm a bit of a fish out of water. As you mentioned, I was at Harvard Business School for 6 years, and I was teaching and researching lots of issues that related to the practice of law, the practice of it, not the actual law itself, and also to other kinds of professional service firms. And through the machinations of Harvard, which isn't very different from any other university, I ended up transferring schools, and now I'm at the law school. I do a lot of executive education. So I work with people, many of whom I think I've probably worked with some of you directly, either in the classroom or on the private side. And I work with law firms all around the world these days, addressing questions of leadership and what I call smart collaboration, which is, in my parlance, getting highly specialized experts together, whether that's across practice groups or across jurisdictions or between lawyers and other kinds of subject matter experts to tackle really complex problems. And of course, these days, all of our problems feel incredibly complex. And so I'm really pleased to be able to join you tonight and bring this insider-outsider or outsider-insider perspective here. And on the question of work-life juggling, perhaps we should call it, probably not balance it at any one time, as Christine picked up on. I think that we need to be true to ourselves. And that sounds a bit trite, but psychologists will tell you that the pressure to compare ourselves to others is incredibly strong. It's a pretty innate pressure. And I think that's part of what's involved in the crazy making these days, is trying to figure out it's not just enough to be a good mom, a good daughter, a great professional. It's, are we as good as, and then we look, right and left, them. And I think that we need to help people figure out what's right for them. Both Christine and Warren said this, and just to put an exclamation point on that, what's really genuinely, authentically right for them in their situation right now. And having those honest discussions in the workplace, having those honest discussions amongst peers and friends and mentors is really crucial, because we know from loads of academic research, and I bet everyone's personal experience, that when you can engage authentically, when you can really show up as who you are, when you feel a sense of psychological safety, that is, you don't feel like you're going to be penalized for admitting some degree of weakness or vulnerability. When we can show up at work like that, the work that we do is that much more engaging, and some of that pressure of are we doing enough begins to subside.
Very interesting. Thank you, Heidi. Let me ask you, Heidi, in the work that you do, the younger kids today, the younger attorneys who are applying to firms, that are interviewing, that are coming out of law school, have their expectations changed? Are they looking at the whole work-life balance differently? What are you seeing?
Oh my goodness, I think it is an entirely different set of expectations. I mean, there's an exception to every rule, of course, but when we talk about averages, I think there are people these days who are asking questions that many of us didn't ask until we were in our 40s or perhaps older, sometimes never. But really deep issues about what am I doing with my life? What's the purpose? What's the meaning? So if I can tell a quick story, I had a law student not long ago who was raving about his experiences prior to law school in an investment bank. And then we got into the discussion of sort of why he left. And he said, you know, the managing directors would sit down with us analysts and talk about the deals we had just completed, not in terms of deal size or profitability or prestige, but in terms of what we had actually accomplished. He'd say, you know, we just helped take public a medical devices company and they make this whatever medical device, and maybe your granny has one, and here's how it helps people. He said, and even though I played just a tiny role in that deal, I was so proud to have been part of it. I said, wow, that's amazing. How often did they do that? He said, once a year. You know, so like they got the rah purpose pep talk once a year. And then the other 364 days, it was kind of get on with it and grind it out. And I think we are all in this profession responsible for helping people understand what they do that has much greater meaning. And I think today's, you know, the new graduates, perhaps the younger generation, they feel empowered to ask these questions. And we could do one of two things. We could either roll our eyes and tell them how privileged they are and why they ought to feel differently about putting in their time and grinding it out. Or we could be looking at them and saying, thank you for nudging me in that direction. Because all of us are going to be better off when we feel like we're part of something bigger. And, you know, that might not, to Christine's point, that might not be every minute of every day. There's always some drudge work associated with anything we do. But if we can rise up and feel some gratitude for the privileges we have to, you know, whatever kind of law you practice, you know, are you helping in the community? Are you helping build businesses that employ lots of people? Are you doing something great in the environmental space or the social space? Or, you know, what can we think of that is more meaningful than turning out the next contract or just showing up at court? And so I'd say let's embrace the spirit of that generation whose expectations are changing. We can come back to the mechanics of, okay, so how do you actually make it work, whether, you know, in the pyramid and so forth. But at this point, you know, if we can focus on how do we give people the sense of meaning and purpose, it's a great place to start.
So thank you, Heidi. Thank you very much. So Warren, you have a young potential attorney coming in for an interview, and you say, well, why would you like to work here? And they say, well, I'm looking for a meaningful life experience. What do you do with that?
So I will say, and I know it's a little bit joking, but it's not that much of a joke, because when we interview young people now who want to come and become associates at our firm, I think the first question is how much time do I need to spend in the office? The second question probably is what do I need to wear when I'm there? And somewhere around question 4 or 5, I think we get to what kind of work do you guys do and do you think I'd be good at? That I think, to Heidi's point, I don't think that's all bad. You know, I think that there's some healthiness in that, and they have a different perspective. I won't say better, worse. I think it's healthy. They have a different perspective on what they're about to get themselves into, and maybe they're ahead of the curve on what we're calling balance. You know, that's not all bad, but when they ask the question, what does it really take? You know, unfortunately, you know, I think what we have to explain to them is there's certainly no magic wand that you can wave, that it does require a certain amount of the grind, and depending on what you want, I mean, you have to ask yourself and be honest with yourself about whether what you are doing on a daily basis matches up with where you want to get to in life. I mean, I think that's a fundamental question that you can try to remind them of, but I don't think there's anything wrong with people having a perspective and entering into a career, setting their own expectation, not so much for how much they want to work, but how they want to work, when they want to work, and where they want to sit when they work. I don't think that's all bad stuff.
Christine, what do you say?
No, I think I have a first-year lawyer daughter, and the way she looks at the practice of law is a little different than the way I looked at it when I was first year. And I think that you can create an environment where the lawyer feels passionate about what they're doing and they're invested in their clients and they like coming to work. Not necessarily coming, but they like the work. And I think we've all grown. I think the pandemic, although how awful it's been for so many people, I think we've all grown. And for those dinosaurs who never thought that a lawyer could practice law from home, they know now lawyers could practice law from home. And for the clients who insisted that I needed to get on a plane to go to California for a 2-hour meeting, they don't want me to go to California anymore because they found out there's this thing called Zoom. And so it saves them a lot of money. That doesn't mean there's not going to be in-person requirements. And it doesn't mean that there's not going to be times where you need to stop what you're doing and focus on your job. And I think that's the lesson that all those young lawyers are going to learn. There's plenty of time where you could work from home and you could, do whatever it is that fits within your schedule. But if you're on trial, you're on trial. The judge is not going to be interested in hearing that you're working from home. And if there's a schedule and there's discovery that has to be done, it's got to get done. If there's a brief and it needs to be filed, it needs to be filed. And sometimes we have those technical difficulties where you have to actually get up and get to the office and get it filed. So I think we're all evolving. And I think in many ways, the pandemic opened our eyes to opportunities that allowed a better work-life balance and created opportunities for young lawyers to have a better practice than we did when we were young.
Thank you, Christine. I think one of the greatest challenges to any type of work-life balance is this: the iPhone. You have your phone with you all the time, 24/7. You're getting calls, you're answering them 3 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't give us any chance to pause. It doesn't give us any chance to rest. And I think that's a big part of balance in life, is knowing when to turn off. I know for me personally, being, observant of Shabbos, knowing that I can unplug from the world for 25 hours a week, every single week, doesn't only give me a chance to spend time with my family, which is nice. They're like, Mom, that man that comes here on the weekends just told me I got to go to sleep. But it really gives me a chance to get away and focus on the things that are most important, which is family, faith, and just myself, just to get a little downtime. I would encourage people to just take the time to get away from the phone and unplug. And the fact that someone sends a text message, I know on trial, people reach out to me 24/7. It's ringing, you don't answer. And guess what? Life moves on. It's okay. What we'll do now, we'll pause for a moment. I'll do something I haven't done in a long time, since the early days when this was the entire crowd of the symposium. We'll take a quick question from the audience, not a statement, not a story, but if someone's got a quick question for the panel, put it out there, and then the judge just arrived and she'll be up here in 2-3 minutes, and we'll continue with the program. Anyone brave enough to raise their hand and ask a question? Yes, Bill. Just ask it loudly. Anyone want to address that? Christine.
I'll start. I'm a big believer in transparency. So if someone tells me I'm going home tonight, I have a dinner party, or I'm going to a wedding on Saturday, or I'm in a wedding this weekend, I will do everything I could do not to make that phone call. But unfortunately, we have clients who have emergencies. They do. And the best clients are the one who only call you when it's a real emergency, right? We have plenty of clients who call when it's not a real emergency, and it's my job to filter those, right? And figure out what's a real emergency and what's not. But there are clients, they just got arrested. Okay, you can't not answer your phone.
I'll see you on Monday.
Yeah, it's like, Or the New York Times is calling for a quote, and I don't know what to say. or, some big decision just got handed down, it just hit the press. You have to be available. And that doesn't happen all the time. Real emergencies don't happen all the time. And law firms and partners in law firms should not be calling associates all the time at home at night. There's no reason. But there are times where you need to, and we need the associate to pick up the phone. And that's what makes the difference between a great associate and an okay associate. The ones that pick it up and engage, we're not going to be there calling them all the time. But when we need them to engage.
Warren?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with all of that, of course, and setting expectation and listening to the people on the other end of the conversation about where they're going to be and what their schedules are. Obviously, that's, team leaders have to do all that. I will say that even if you think you're being polite, we ran, some of my colleagues from Cole Shots will know this, that, we had I would say an inflection point going back a few years where, even some of our well-intended partners who thought they were doing the right thing by emailing and not calling an associate at 11:30 at night and saying, hey, this has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen. I don't think they appreciate that when the associate gets that email at 11:30 at night, they feel like they have to respond, at least the good ones, the great ones, right?
Agree.
So we try to at least say, just don't do it. Wait till the morning if it can wait. Some of us are like, well, if I wait till the morning, I'll certainly forget it. So I better do it now. Okay. Well, if you're going to do it now, can at least say, please don't respond to this now. We could talk about it in the morning, but I had this thought. Just think about it and we'll talk about it tomorrow. At least try to be respectful to the fact that somebody else is home. They may be sleeping. They may be with their family. And if it's not something that requires an immediate response, and we're talking about internal communications now, not even the external, it's very hard to control what the clients do, but they pay a lot of money to have us available. And so that's a whole other issue, which I'm sure we'll get into.
We'll get into that a little bit later.
But yes, there are things that you can do to kind of modify your own internal behavior to make it more pleasant an experience for the person on the other end of the email or the call.
Heidi, quick thought, then we're going to go to the judge.
I think it is about clarifying expectations, and I think it's about psychological safety. It's a term that I used a moment ago. Psychological safety is when people feel like it's okay to bring up uncomfortable issues, whether that's asking for help or admitting mistakes, and creating that environment of psychological safety where it's okay for people to say, I'm always there for you, except on whatever Wednesday nights, or and they'll chime in and do their part when they can, and if they can be as transparent as possible and admit when they're, for whatever reason, unavailable. I think that's absolutely crucial. It's the essence of leadership to create that sort of psychological safety and to make people aware that there's a balance in here. There's a give and take.